A battlefield veteran just broke ranks and dropped the most explosive demand yet: Pete Hegseth must resign, immediately. And this wasn't political theater or a partisan stunt. It was a soldier who's walked through fire, who's made life or death calls in the chaos of combat, looking across the table and declaring that America's leadership has failed its own troops. Jason Crow didn't just criticize. He ripped the mask off what he called a reckless, dangerous breach of national security, one so severe that it put American lives directly in harm's way. This wasn't about disagreements over policy. This was about a signal chain where sensitive operational details, classified at the very highest level, were passed around like casual chatter.
What we did, Congressman, is we put out cybersecurity advisories on a whole host of systems.
On the Signal app that was included in that advisory, right?
What we've done is we've put out an advisory on how to use the Signal app and other encrypted applications, because we do encourage our employees and their families to use encrypted.
Because there's risk to that app.
There are.
Okay. General Cruz, DOD also issued a warning about vulnerabilities to the Signal app recently, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Director Gabbard, you were on the Signal text chain in question, correct?
Yes.
As was Mr. Witkoff, the administration's lead negotiator with the Russians, correct?
Yes.
And at the time, Mr. Witkoff was actually in Russia during this chat discussion, was he not?
I was not aware of that.
Was he on his personal phone at the time?
I don't know.
Well, it's my understanding that he was indeed in Russia. Director Gabbard, you were also traveling during this discussion, correct?
Yes.
And where were you?
I was traveling through the Asia-Pacific region. I don't recall which country I was in at that time.
You don't remember the country?
I'd have to go back and look at the schedule.
Director Gabbard, I want to direct your attention again to the text chain where it says, just confirmed with CENTCOM, we are a go for mission launch. Does that indicate to you that there is about to be a military operation?
Yes.
Director Gabbard, earlier in this hearing, we heard about the DOD's classification standards. I want to now turn my attention to your classification standards. You're the Director of National Intelligence. The Office of the Director of National Intelligence classification guide says, quote, information providing indication or advance warning that the U.S. or its allies are preparing for an attack, end quote, is to be classified as top secret. Are you familiar with that?
Yes.
Director Gabbard, have the Houthis indicated an ability to shoot down American aircraft?
Yes.
They have in fact done so, haven't they?
Yes.
Including MQ-9 Reapers, haven't they?
That's correct.
And that was one of the systems used in the attack recently that's the subject of this discussion, is it not?
Correct.
General Cruz, are you familiar with this system?
I'm not wearing my glasses at the moment, but...
Well, I'll help you out. This is an SA-3 anti-aircraft system.
Correct.
Are you familiar with this next system?
I am.
What is it?
I'm going to have to ask you.
It's an SA-6.
I'm going to guess that...
This is also an advanced anti-aircraft system, is it not?
It is. It was used widely in the Balkans in the 90s, correct?
And the Houthis also have this system, don't they?
They certainly do.
And they've employed it against our aircraft, have they not?
They have attempted to, correct.
I spent my life in service to this country. I deployed 3 times to combat in service to this nation. I learned in that time in service that responsibility is core to leadership. You accept responsibility when things go wrong. You admit mistakes. You set the standard from the very top. It is completely outrageous to me that administration officials come before us today with impunity. No acceptance of responsibility. Excuse after excuse after excuse, while we send our men and women downrange to do incredibly difficult, incredibly dangerous things on our behalf. And yet, nobody is willing to come to us and say this was wrong. This was a breach of security and we won't do it again. It is outrageous and it is a leadership failure, and that's why Secretary Hegseth, who undoubtedly transmitted classified, sensitive operational information via this chain, must resign immediately. There can be no fixes, There can be no corrections until there is accountability, and I'm calling on the administration to move forward with accountability.
Worse still, that discussion happened while one participant sat on foreign soil in the middle of a hostile capital. For Crow, that wasn't a slip-up, it was betrayal, and what he said next shocked the entire room because it turned a hearing into a direct call for accountability at the very top. It all began with a leak, one that exposed a quiet but stunning failure inside America's most guarded circles. A Signal group chat involving some of the most senior national security officials in the country suddenly found its way into the public spotlight. On its face, it might have looked like a simple thread of coordination, the kind of back and forth that happens every day in government. But this was no routine discussion. Within those lines of text were words pointing directly to the imminent launch of a U.S. military operation. To those familiar with classification standards, that kind of information isn't just sensitive, it's protected at the very highest level, labeled top secret. Yet here it was, moving across a civilian messaging app, a platform already flagged by the NSA and the Department of Defense as risky for government use. And the most troubling part, this wasn't just idle chatter among junior staff, it was a conversation where leaders at the highest levels, including the Secretary of Defense himself, appeared to treat classified details as if encryption alone would shield them from adversaries. For Jason Crow, this wasn't misjudgment, it was the spark that set off his fury. To understand why this leak was so alarming, you have to look at what the rules actually say. Under U.S. classification standards, any hint that the nation or its allies are preparing for an attack must be placed under the strictest protection, top secret. That designation isn't symbolic, it's the line that ensures adversaries are kept in the dark and American lives are kept safe. Yet in this case, the very language pointing to an imminent mission launch was left sitting in a Signal chat, a civilian app designed for private users, not national security officials. While Signal is encrypted, the National Security Agency and the Department of Defense have both repeatedly warned of its vulnerabilities, especially when used for sensitive operations. Every digital platform has weak spots, and the more it's used outside of secure systems, the easier it becomes for hostile actors to exploit. The danger wasn't just theoretical. One weak link could mean giving adversaries the timing, the location, or the strategy of a mission before it even begins. For Jason Crow, who had seen what a single slip can cost on the battlefield, this wasn't just a mistake, it was a crisis waiting to explode. If the use of a civilian app wasn't troubling enough, the most shocking twist was where one of the participants was during this exchange. According to Jason Crow, the administration's lead negotiator with Moscow was physically in Russia at the very moment the Signal chat unfolded. Think about that, sensitive details hinting at an imminent U.S. military operation were being discussed in real time, while one of the participants sat on foreign soil, inside a nation that has long been considered one of America's top adversaries. That wasn't just careless, it was a counterintelligence officer's worst nightmare. To make matters worse, others in the chat were traveling abroad, moving through regions where communications are more easily monitored by hostile powers. The fact that this conversation wasn't contained within a secure military-only channel meant that adversaries didn't need to break into a hardened government system, they just needed to exploit an app already flagged for weaknesses. For Crow, the message was simple: if America's own leadership is willing to risk exposure at that level, then accountability must be demanded. Because in national security, there are no harmless mistakes, only openings that an enemy is waiting to exploit. Jason Crow didn't stop at pointing out the breach, he broke down exactly what was being discussed in that chat, and why it mattered so much. Inside the conversation were references to advanced anti-aircraft systems, including the SA-3 and the SA-6. These aren't abstract names from a textbook, they're lethal weapons that have shaped battlefields for decades. The SA-6, for example, was notorious during the conflicts in the Balkans, where it was used effectively against Western aircraft. And now groups like the Houthis are reported to have access to these systems, the very same ones they've already employed in attempts to shoot down American planes. In fact, U.S. drones such as the MQ-9 Reaper have already fallen to hostile fire. For Crow, who has led soldiers into combat, this wasn't a hypothetical debate. It was a real-time reminder of the threats American pilots and service members are facing every day in hostile skies. Discussing these details on an unsecured platform didn't just risk embarrassment, it risked giving adversaries the very tools they need to put American lives in danger. That reality, more than anything else, is what drove his outrage to a boiling point. When the hearing turned to accountability, Jason Crow's frustration became impossible to ignore. As a combat veteran, he had lived by one of the military's most sacred principles: leaders accept responsibility when things go wrong. Yet as he listened to the testimony, what he heard instead was a string of evasions. Officials shifted blame, downplayed the severity of the breach, and offered technical justifications instead of owning up to mistakes. To Crow, this wasn't just bureaucratic spin, it was an insult to every soldier who risks everything by following orders to the letter. On the battlefield, excuses don't protect lives. Clarity, honesty, and responsibility do. Crow's voice shook as he pointed out the disconnect. Men and women were flying into hostile airspace, facing threats from advanced weapon systems, while those at the very top seemed unwilling to admit they had mishandled the information that put those service members at greater risk. In his eyes, the refusal to say, "This was wrong, and it won't happen again," was more than cowardice, it was betrayal. And that betrayal, he warned, would only repeat itself unless someone was willing to pay the price of accountability. At that moment, Jason Crow did something few members of Congress are ever willing to do. He dropped the careful language, stripped away the formalities, and issued a demand as direct as it gets: the secretary must resign, not after a drawn-out review, not after a slow-moving investigation. Right now, Crow argued that the breach wasn't an error that could be patched with a new policy memo or an extra layer of training. It was a leadership failure at the highest level, one that proved those in charge had lost sight of their responsibility to the men and women on the front lines. Without accountability, he warned, nothing would change. Service members would continue to shoulder the risks, while those making the decisions avoided the consequences. That, Crow declared, was unacceptable. His call wasn't just about replacing one official, it was about sending a message that no leader, no matter how senior, is above the rules of security and responsibility. By demanding immediate resignation, Crow shifted the hearing from routine oversight into a moment of raw confrontation, one that placed accountability front and center. Crow's demand for resignation wasn't just about one official, it was about the signal it would send to every corner of the military. For years, young soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines have been drilled on security protocols. They're told that even a careless word, even a minor breach, can put missions and lives at risk. And they know the penalties for breaking those rules are severe. Yet here, at the very highest level of government, sensitive details were passed around casually, and when confronted, the response was to dodge and deny. What message does that send to the rank and file? That rules are only enforced for those without power. That accountability is optional at the top. Crow warned that this double standard doesn't just damage trust, it corrodes the very chain of command that keeps the military functional. If troops begin to believe their leaders won't hold themselves to the same standards they demand of others, morale collapses and discipline erodes. The larger message of this hearing was clear: accountability isn't a talking point. It's the foundation of trust, and without it, the entire system begins to crack. At the heart of Jason Crow's demand was a truth too often ignored: in national security, one careless moment can cost lives. A single message sent through the wrong channel, a single hint of operational timing in the wrong hands, that's all it takes for an adversary to prepare a deadly ambush. And when those at the very top fail to respect that reality, the risk doesn't just fall on paper, it falls on the shoulders of young men and women serving in hostile skies and dangerous ground missions. Crow's fury was about more than one breach, it was about a culture of impunity that tells leaders they can bend the rules while expecting soldiers to obey them without question. That double standard corrodes trust, weakens discipline, and ultimately endangers every mission. The bigger truth is simple: leadership isn't about avoiding blame, it's about owning it. If accountability disappears at the highest levels, then the very foundation of America's defense begins to crack. Crow's words weren't just a challenge to one official, they were a call to remind every leader that the weight of responsibility is not optional, it's the cost of command.